and welcome to the next edition of Mattanory. It's been a little while since the last one, but life gets in the way of things sometimes. You find us in West Sussex, namely Arundel. Over to my left is Arundel Castle. You can't really see it, but you can see a little tower just on the outside grounds of it. And back here on this non-distinct bit of land is a burial chamber. Not just any burial chamber, it's the burial chamber of a giant. This is the story of a giant and of unrequited love, sadly. It's called Bevis of Arundel. The story begins in a time of giants that superseded the time of dragons. The giants had driven away the dragons from the land, not by guile and cunning, but by just chucking rocks at them. The dragon that had squatted hissing and steaming on the hill above Arundel had hurled itself screaming into a bottomless pool at Lyminster, which is an entrance to the other world. He was to emerge periodically, but maybe that's a story for another time. So the giant Bevis sat on a rock overlooking the river Arundel and watched the world change. He was very, very old. He picked the dry skin from between his toes, skimmed stones across the water to the Isle of Wight, and he watched the river flow to the sea in times of rain and in times of drought. He watched the people paddle up the river, the little dark people in Neolithic times, the Romans, the Belgae, the various Jutes and Saxons. He watched the clearings being made in the forests around us, and the smoke trailing up to the sky from the settlement fires. He watched cultures change, and as often as not, he saw the people adapting to a new cultural wave, rather than an actual new wave of people. Then it was the time of the Normans who came, and they built a castle just over there. Bevis adapted, became its guardian, and sat by the main gate pulling faces at anyone who looked like trouble. For this less than onerous task, he was given a whole ox every week, plus 2 hogsheads of beer, all of which he consumed with bread and mustard, as is his wont. This continued into the medieval period, although they didn't call it the medieval period back then. Now is always now, if that makes sense. The old stories relate that Bevis would periodically wade across the water to the Isle of Wight, but they never say why. These stories are found here in Sussex, but no tales from the Isle of Wight tell of incoming giants or anyone, let alone someone called Bevis. Though they had their own giants over in the Isle of Wight, it falls to this story to expose what Bevis was actually up to. He would wade in the general direction of the Isle of Wight until his head sunk beneath the waves, but he would never arrive. The truth is, he was heading for the Mixen Hole, where he had an assassination with the beautiful green wibbly-wobbly princess that dwelt therein. It's sad to relate, though, that from the princess's point of view, it was just lust. She had a thing for giants, and Bevis, big, silly, soft-hearted Bevis, was just one of many giants. But Bevis, poor Bevis, believed he had fallen in love, and if he believed he'd fallen in love, why then, so he had. One day, amidst the green caverns of the Mixen Hole, before they got down to action, Bevis went down upon bended knee and declared his love. "Marry me, O wondrous and wobbly one," he declared. "Come to Arundel and be my lady. I will build for thee the mightiest fish tank in all of Christendom." After, of course, reinforcing the walls and, subject to local planning permissions and health and safety laws. "And from then on thou shalt survey all the lands for which thou shalt be a lady. For the dukes, duchesses, earl and earlesses are but names, and it is us, the folk myth and legend, that really rule this land." "Oh Christ," thought the princess of Mixen Hole, "he's gone all soft in the head. I can't think of anything worse than marrying him. I never had this trouble with the Kernabbis giant." "Ah, mighty Bevis," quoth she, "thy offer is indeed wondrous, But I belong here amidst the green caverns, the silver skulls that swim around through the Atlantic, the eddies and tides that do swirl around the sunken rocks and wrecks of Manhood Peninsula. I am of the sea and could never live like a prisoner on the land. Nice one, she thought. That'll shut him up. But it didn't. Then, oh, must be married, merry maid, quoth Bevis. I will forsake all that I hold dear on land. I will come and dwell beneath the ocean wave. I will live under the rolling deep, where the scattered waters rave, and the winds keep their revels. I will take the tail, which is what sometimes fishermen used to do when they married mer people. I will be thy merman prince, and when thy father and mother pass on to the subcutaneous caverns of glory, you and I will reign as king and queen of the Mixen Hull. Oh, my generous and gigantic lover, she replied, it could never be. Thou art of the land, and I am of the sea. No, no, please be mine, he pleaded. Always a mistake, pleading in love. I cannot live without you. You must be mine. Finally, it was all too much for her. His pleading and blubbery, teary, mooning face, his pathetically beseeching eyes and his runny nose all irritated her beyond endurance. Do you really think I'd marry you, she screeched, you girt, big, lubbering, stupid giant. Look at you, thick as the Sussex mud and chalk you come from. OK, you're a bit fit for a touch of the old dalliance, but do you really think I'd want anything to do with you when you go bald and your teeth fall out? Go on, bugger off back to Arundel and don't come sniffing around here no more. Oh, Bevis. The crack as his heart broke could be heard upon the South Downs as it raised a tsunami, then demolished the town of Frankenville on the Isle of Wight, and even knocked down one of the chalk pillars of the Needles. And blindedly, he stumbled back to Arundel and took to his great iron bed. The Earl of Arundel and his lady came to Giant's bedside and pleaded with him to cheer up, and so did the entire population of the castle. But if your heart is broken, the last thing you need is a lot of people trying to cheer you up. Bevis sought only oblivion. He lifted his mighty sword, known as Mortglay, and said to the assembled multitude, wherever this sword landeth, there lay my poor body to rest. And he hurled it out of the window. Then he closed his eyes and died. The people took to a team of oxen and hauled the body out to where the sword was sticking out of the ground, right here. And there they buried him. This is called Arundel Park, which is a stretch of countryside behind the castle. And this is Bevis's tomb, apparently. Some say it's a long barrow, but you can clearly see from the right point of view, it's the grave of a giant. So this story must be true. And you can even find Bevis' sword in the castle. But don't take any photos because they tell you off.